Okay, so we are getting ready to read chapter 4, which is titled April. It's called April, a Hungry Ghost. This is a longer chapter, so if this is a video that you want to watch half of and then come back and watch the other half, I understand. Here is the picture that we have. So remember in our last chapter, Shirley went and they snuck out for lunch, and she thought that everybody was going to be really good friends with her. And her mom had told her she was China's ambassador, and she took that to mean that she was representing every single person in China. So it's called April, a Hungry Ghost. Day by day, week by week, little by little, Shirley shrank until she was no more. It was the only explanation. Why else did the class, which had welcomed her so warmly at first, ignore her so now? True, she could only speak a few words at a time, and most often no one could even guess at the meaning of those. True, she was a coward. Those who broke the rules to go to Mr. Pease no longer bothered with her. True, she was stupid. Too stupid to know the difference between a wink and a tick until Father explained. But still, didn't they know how lonely she felt? It was spring now, but Shirley, hunched in her coat, walked as if there were still snow on the ground. Carefully, she sidestepped the boys who played basketball, the girls who roller skated, the groups who seemed to laugh or whisper whenever she passed. She dreaded the distance across the schoolyard. It was endless and full of traps. If a loose ball rolled by, should she catch it? If a girl fell, should she help her up? If someone glanced her way, should she wave? This afternoon, as every afternoon, she pretended to have somewhere to go and hurried on. But she had nowhere to go but home. At Mr. P's she slowed down. The pennies in her pocket jingled to be spent, but the usual crowd was pressed nose to nose at the counter, and she hurried on. With no one to talk to, she mumbled to herself. Buffalo, stink, stank, stuck, liberty, slave, Mississippi liver. She tried to string these new words with the old ones in sentences, but she had no more success than a blind man threading beads. Ahead was a gang playing stoop ball, blocking her way. She waited for a quiet moment when she could pass. This game was different from others. This one she knew how to play. It was just Trap the Birdie, except instead of throwing up feathers stuck inside the hole of a coin, the player bounced a ball against the step and called out a mystery number. The one assigned that number had to catch the ball to win a point for his team. Suddenly, a ball flew overhead and the crowd was running toward her. She ducked into the deli next door for safety. It smelled strangely, as if packed with dirty, damp socks, which upon closer inspection she recognized as cheese and fish. Not the silvery catches that swam and somersaulted in the wooden basins that lined the market at the foot of the mountain of 10,000 steps. Dead fish. So long dead that Cook would probably not even throw them out to the cats. Slivers of gray fish pickled in white glue, smoked fish with yellow eyes that bulged, raw red fish without heads or tails. The owner spoke up. Pointing to a pack of juicy fruit gum, Shirley handed him the pennies. She waited by the door for the ball to fly in the opposite direction. When the coast was clear, she started to run across the sidewalk. Just then a voice asked, "Want to play?" It belonged to Joseph, who sat behind her in class. His hair was always slicked down and scientifically parted in the middle. His belly protruded just enough for his hands to rest comfortably upon it. His face was pure white, as if his mother had powdered her baby on the wrong end. But to Shirley, at this moment, he was the handsomest boy in all of Brooklyn. "Please," she said, "please." The other players groaned, but did nothing to stop Joseph from whispering in her ear, "You are number 8 on my team." She nodded eagerly, then bowed to all the players. They groaned again. The next number called was hers. She ran after the ball, bumping teammates along the way, only to let it slip through her fingers. It didn't matter. She was on a team. Her happiness did not last. No sooner had she learned to smack the ball smartly on the steps, angling it, left or right, than the other players revolted. Nobody wanted the Chinese on his team, for whenever she yelled out a mystery number, it was no mystery at all. It was always 1 or true or tree. No surprise. Always 1 or true or tree. In this moment of excitement of hurling the ball, she couldn't remember how to say higher numbers, especially after she had missed every ball when the other team called 8. Pretty soon they were calling 8 almost every time. Her team was losing, and it was all her fault. Finally, Joseph approached her with an outstretched hand. She shrugged, gave up the ball, and stood apart again to watch. She laughed along when someone missed. She cheered along when someone scored. Always a second too late, a second too long, yet none of the gang noticed. They seemed not to see her at all. She ought to go home, she thought. Mother had learned to make delicious cupcakes. But she did not move. She stood by instead, like a hungry ghost. Finally, one player left. Shirley followed a few steps behind her, pretending to kick a castaway can whenever the American turned to glance her way. At home, she locked herself in the bathroom. Tiptoed on the toilet seat, she peered into the mirror, trying to blow bubbles with her juicy fruit gum. Even the first graders blew bubbles as big as a full moon. Hers were no bigger than a button. Jaws aching, she tried again and again. She had to do something right. Had to. Our daughter's not herself, she heard Mother say to Father when she thought Shirley was asleep. She'll be fine again soon, Father said. Even the finest engine has a few knocks at first. But I'm not an engine, she thought. Engines don't cry. Engines don't need friends to talk to play with, to share. Reaching out, she tried to pretend fourth cousin was there. The next day, everyone was assigned a poem to recite. Shirley was not. She decided to learn one anyway. Over and over, she played the new record Father had bought for her, imitating each sound until she was certain she could repeat a stanza. Then, locking herself in the bathroom, she practiced before the mirror. She gestured to the right. She gestured to the left. Not exactly certain of the meaning of the words, she dared not elaborate more. Her father, who spoke English well and tutored her, could have explained them all, but Shirley wanted her efforts to be a complete surprise. Wait until they hear, she told herself, just wait. In class, she was disappointed when Mrs. Rappaport did not call for volunteers, but asked each student to recite in turn by seats. Down the first row, up the second. At last, it was Joseph's turn, and she was next. Sidling to the edge of her seat, she waited, so sure of her success that she was not even nervous. Joseph's poem seemed very long. Would it never end so she could shine? Before he even sat down, she popped up. Everyone murmured, wondering at the Chinese ambassador. Shirley waited for complete silence. Then, clearing her throat, she began. At once they were giggling, even Mrs. Rappaport. There was nothing to do but gesture to the right, gesture to the left, exactly as she had practiced, exactly as she had practiced, only faster and faster until finally the stanza was done. Now everyone was laughing openly. Shirley pretended to share their merriment, but tears welled in her throat and she could only manage a weak smile. What had gone wrong? Had she done something stupid again? She wanted to run, but her feet would not obey. The laughter continued. Soon she stood like a forlorn scarecrow under a pelting rain. Mrs. Rappaport was the first to notice that Shirley was no longer smiling and immediately clapped for order. When at last the room was still, she spoke. Thank you for a most remarkable performance. It must have taken hours and hours to mimic each syllable just right. At first, I thought my ears were deceiving me. How it possible? Right here in our classroom, the fabulous Donald Duck, Chip and Dale, and Mickey Mouse. So she had been singing a Mickey Mouse song. It was like a Mickey Mouse song, and she had been reciting it as if it was a poem. Despite these efforts to soothe her feelings, Shirley felt humiliated. From then on, she hardly spoke, not even in Chinese to her mother. For whenever she complained, Mother would say, Always be worthy, my daughter, of your good fortune. Born to an illustrious clan from the ancient civilization of China, you now live in the land of plenty and opportunity. By your conduct, show that you deserve to enjoy the best of both worlds. This tidbit found its way to the dinner table almost as frequently as the odious glass of milk. One night, Mother announced a plan to cheer Shirley up. When she was Shirley's age, she had pleaded with her father permission to take piano lessons. What? boomed the old-fashioned scholar who barely approved of teaching females to read and write. What? My daughter, a sing-song girl? Never. Now she assumed that her own daughter would be overjoyed to do something she herself had never been permitted to do. She arranged for Shirley to have piano lessons. Tomorrow after school, she would go downstairs to the basement where Senora Rodriguez, the landlady, doubled as a music teacher. The next day, after a gentle knock, Shirley waited nervously. She had never met the Senora before, but she had often seen a sinister shadow rocking back and forth behind billowing lace curtains back and forth into the night. The door opened. There stood the Senora, short and stout, wrapped in layer upon layer of black woolen shawls. Her skin was like crinkled tissue paper, her eyes sunken and dark as well water. She smiled ever so fleetingly, as if pained by the exercise. "Hello, how you do? I'm Shirley, and my mother." She eked out the words as if squeezing dregs from a squashed tube of stale toothpaste. The response was less than reassuring, just the twitch of a stubby finger to follow. She obeyed, her gaze fixed on the golden wedgies that slapped to the bottom of the woman's bulging feet as she led the way through a curtain of colored beads to the piano. It, too, was covered with shawls. With a pat on the wooden bench, she invited Shirley to sit beside her. It was not going to be easy. The Senora occupied all but the tiniest sliver of the seat. Only by locking her feet around a leg of the bench did Shirley manage to stay perched. Carefully, she twisted her to face her teacher. Without a word, the Senora grimaced, and out came a set of upper and lower teeth. With them, she casually set on the upper and lower teeth, which she then casually set on the music stand. Oh. Let me go back and reread that, because I totally think she just took out her dentures and put them on the piano. Carefully, she twisted her face to her teacher. Without a word, the Senora grimaced, so she gave a bad look, and out came a set of upper and lower teeth, which she then casually set on the music stand. So she did. She just, Shirley smiles at her, and the Senora's like, ugh, and then pops out her fake teeth and sticks them on the music stand next to Shirley. Stuck between the molars, something green. String beans or broccoli? Shirley tried not to look, but the teeth were exactly at eye level. So she's trying to focus on these piano lessons, and this lady's fake teeth with green vegetables stuck in them are just staring her in the face. Grinning like a newborn, the Senora now took Shirley's hand in hers. They felt surprisingly warm and soft, like a pair of mittens. When she finally spoke, her low, accented voice resembled the moaning of grandmother's favorite fortune teller, frightening and fascinating all at once. "I will teach these hands to make music. Music, the language of angels. Angels who give happiness to all living things. Things like little girls. See?" "I see. Bueno, we begin." Placing Shirley's thumb on a key, the Senora pressed it down to summon a note. "This, do this." Redo that. "Do, this is do." Pushing her index finger, she said, "Re, this is re." And so it went until Shirley learned to name the white keys. At least 100 years seemed to have passed before Shirley could bend and unbend her stubborn fingers well enough to hit each of the 8 notes of the scale without disturbing its neighbor. By then, her head ached, her fingers ached, her foot ached. This was not the language of angels, but the curse of demons. Did Mother not realize what she had been spared? Just when Shirley thought the ordeal was ended, Senora Rodriguez left the room and returned with a green bird in a cage. A little surprise. The Senora set the bird on top of the piano. At once it began to squawk, "Ray, Ray, Ray, Ray." "Play the right note for Toscanini," the Senora suggested hurriedly. Looking about, Shirley wondered who was to play, and who was Toscanini? "Ray, Ray, Ray!" The bird was flapping its wings now. "Ray, Ray, Ray!" Pointing to the correct key, the Senora said, "Play, little girl, before the birdie makes us loco." So here's a picture. So you've got little Shirley playing, the Senora, and then there's the bird who we now know as Toscanini, who wants her to play the note Ray. Also, you can see right here, there's the set of teeth with green vegetables in them, staring Shirley right in the face. Shirley did. There was a glorious silence, but not for long. Fa, 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 fa. Frantically, Shirley searched for fa, then played it. Relief, then me. And so it went until at last a single squawk produced the desired response. Toscanini was not impressed. On and on he squawked while she poked at the keys, on and on until her fingers acquired a will of their own, on and on until the notes blended into a melody so compelling that Shirley and Senora began to sway from side to side and sing along. So enchanted were they by their duet that the miracle at first went unnoticed. Toscanini was speechless. Content now to perch silently on his swing, the bird kept an eye on the proceedings with an occasional 360-degree flip of the head. With the last note still in the air, Senora Rodriguez popped her teeth back inside her mouth. The lesson was over. But the next week, Shirley's fingers seemed as clumsy as ever, and now there were lessons on the piano, in addition to the lessons at school. Hour after hour, day after day, week after week, study, more study, and yet study again. None of this would have truly mattered if she had had someone to walk down the long corridors at PS 8 with. Someone to complain to about being the only Chinese in the school and the only one who had to take piano lessons. Someone who cared if there was a Shirley Temple Wong in this world. But that someone did not exist. On the last day of school before spring vacation, she spotted a new girl entering another classroom. An older Chinese girl with pigtails just like herself. Shirley hurried to greet her, but when she was just within shouting distance, the bell rang and the door closed. All that morning, she sat at her desk, unable to concentrate on what Mrs. Rappaport was teaching. She eyed the clock. Soon it would be lunchtime, she thought. Soon they would meet in the cafeteria. For once, she could not speak fluently. For once, she could speak fluently, not like an idiot. This time others, not Shirley, would feel left out. She smiled, imagining the fun of talking about things the others, not Shirley, knew little about. Things like the New Year's parade with the dragon that flew on tall poles, the lion that pounced to the beat of the drums, the acrobats that whirled through the air, the monkeys dressed in costumes, and yes, of course, naturally, the blind storyteller. When the lunch bell sounded, Shirley raced to be the front in line and waited impatiently for the new girl. Today, she did not mind that no one spoke to her. At last, the girl came into view. Shirley rushed to her side. Ni hao? Wo jiao Shirley? Wo yesker chung kao lady? The girl looked puzzled, then shook her head, giggling. I don't speak Chinese. I'm from Chattanooga. Laughter sped up and down the line. Shirley slunk back to her classroom. She wasn't hungry anymore. The Klansmen were right. America was foreign. So foreign. During the spring recess, Shirley had nothing to do, not even homework. Why don't you go out and play? Suggested her mother. I don't feel like it. Would you like a cupcake? I don't feel like it. Well, what do you feel like? Shirley shrugged. At night, when she was supposedly asleep, Shirley again heard Mother whispering about her. This time Father said nothing about engines. He merely listened. Occasionally, he sighed. On Tuesday, just as Shirley and her mother were about to wash the lunch dishes, Father suddenly burst into the apartment. In his hand, a package. On his face, that smile. What are you doing home so early, my husband? I can't stay, but I have something here for Shirley. For me? He nodded, handing her the box. Shirley tore it open. Inside was a pair of shiny roller skates. Before she could even give him a hug, he said, Now go out and play. Out in the sunlight, the air was balmy, and through skies of palest sapphire sailed clouds of gossamer silk. As she sat on the stoop putting on her skates, Shirley dreamed of the day when she would be able to race, sashay backwards and spin on one foot. Then, and only then, would she strap the skates together, sling them over her shoulder, and march off to join the skaters at school. They would not ignore her then, not when she could do something they could do, not when she could skate just like an American. Skates on, she stood up. Off to the right slid one foot, off to the left slid the other. She crashed to the sidewalk. What mattered if a bruise or two? Without hesitation, but only after numerous false starts, she finally succeeded in scrambling back to an upright position. There. Arms a-twirl, she teetered forward. She tottered back. The wicked skates refused to obey and dumped her on the ground once more. By supper time, Shirley looked like the beggars who waited by the servants' gate for scraps from the clan table. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her elbows and knees were bleeding, and she was no closer to becoming a skater than when she started. Never mind, she couldn't wait for tomorrow. Mother, however, did not share her enthusiasm. I had no idea skating was so dangerous. You could have broken a leg, fallen unconscious, been run over by a car. Give the skates to me, now. This was the droplet that broke the dam. Tears fell as Shirley handed over the skates. Are they so important to you? Mother asked. Shirley nodded. Mother pretended to busy herself with the skates. Well, she said gently, perhaps when your bruises are healed and your father's not busy, he can go skating with you. But that would not be the same. And that is the end of chapter 4, April.